Hi, I'm John Solari, your host of the Method Actor Speaks. And today we have a very special guest. She finally said yes. I've been after you for how long to
Long
come
time.
on? I'm going to let you introduce yourself, Cynthia.
All right, well, I'm Cynthia Clark, Dr. Cynthia Clark.
Doctor, right.
Yes.
That's you have two, Doctor and Cynthia, because you're also a SAG member,
Right.
after SAG after. And you're doctor, what is that in?
I have actually two doctorates. One is a PsyD, which is a clinical psychologist, and the other is a PhD.
Can we
And
show that to
this
the audience?
is a book that hopefully will be coming out soon
You want to
called,
leave it right here?
it's going to go off the screen in a
Oh,
second.
okay.
In the Mind of a Killer, which is true interviews with serial killers and mass murderers, mostly on death row.
Yeah, I remember you told that, but I really want to know, why did you get interested in doing something like that?
I was finishing my doctorate, and it was many years ago. I was on Days of Our Lives and Stat, as a regular on Stat, and I got a stalker. At that time, we didn't call them stalkers. I was blown off as, he's an obscene phone caller. Yeah, he comes to your house and he rings your doorbell and he takes pictures of you, but he's no big deal. I didn't believe that. I thought he was dangerous. So I set out to prove he was dangerous. And it was not an easy task, because there was no documentation out there, nothing to show the police that these people could be crazy. So I was just 3 weeks away from my doctorate in post-traumatic stress, Vietnam vets. And then I started calling different psychological organizations and publications, and Sage Publications said to me, we're interested in this topic. If you change your thesis to this topic about these people, we still weren't calling them stalkers yet, we'll publish you. And I said, you give me that in writing and I'll change it. So I changed my thesis, and I thought, okay, now what do I do? So I thought, who probably hunted down people to be violent? And I said, well, serial killers did. So I interviewed 77 serial killers. And some of them are in this book, some are in some other books that I have planned afterwards. So it takes a journey with, I found, for example, that serial killers, whether they're attractive or not attractive, and usually they're one or the other, they will woo you and try to be charming for about 6 interviews. 6th to 7th interview, they show their true colors. Because
Really?
they see that they're not sucking you into their little psychopathic, sociopathic venue.
Do they try to get rid of you, or is that what you mean?
Either that or try
close
to
up?
make sure you don't testify against them if they have an appeal. Because,
Well, they all have appeals.
well, some are worn out,
Really?
finally. But in California, for example, we haven't put somebody to death since we
Been a
put
long
Tookie
time.
Williams, yeah.
I do a one-man show. I work on Gary Gilmore from The Executioner's Son.
Mm-hmm.
And he has that line, he says, when he's talking to Nicole, I do the actual letters that he wrote. And one of them there is, what do? They haven't executed anybody here since 1972. And, that's when they did away.
Mm-hmm.
I was in prison then when they did away with that. And I remember when they did it. I remember when they brought it back in New York.
Yeah.
There was only one
we
guy.
did that too, here.
There was one guy on death row. One guy.
Wow.
And when they had moved it from Sing Sing to Greenhaven, the chair. And I remember that Christmas, and when we were all going to chow lines, we would walk down, there'd be this big box, and everybody would throw things in it, food, cigarettes, whatever, for Christmas. Because there was only one guy on death row.
Wow.
And this was around 1973.
That's amazing for New York.
That's that's always on death row. Just before they had done away with it.
Right.
So I guess he was the first.
To come back. Wow. Interesting.
You should look into that.
Yeah.
That'd be an interesting story. The first guy.
Yeah.
to come
Yeah,
back.
because what happened with us in California is we did away with it and then we did it back. The people who were on death row when we did away with it are not on, they're lifers.
Lifers
But
now,
then
yeah.
now we're right back up to this, we didn't have just one, we came back with a whole bunch.
You're right. Well, I
Yeah.
mean, it's really, today, I remember they were looking to close Sing Sing when I was there. There was only about 70 of us. inmates.
That's relatively small for a prison.
No, I mean, I'm serious.
Yeah, no, I believe you.
There was about 70 inmates, and that's all we had there. I mean, you had to know somebody. Thank God I was Italian. We got to stay in Sing Sing.
Okay, that works.
You had to know somebody to be, to stay there. But it's amazing now. There's so many prisons now, and so different.
Oh,
I mean, I got out. I got off parole in 1980. Excuse me. So I know that I don't. I mean, when I look at the programs and when you've been around, I mean, it's so different night and day. Now you got half of the population is in jail now.
Oh,
Big business.
And for silly reasons, serious reasons, but silly reasons too.
Well, it started like in New York with the Rockefeller law, drug law. They called it the Rockefeller law. If you caught smoking marijuana, you can get 1 to life.
Which is ridiculous.
Yeah, it really is. But somebody now, the interesting part about it is all these. That had to be really depressing. To interview all these
scary.
Well, not only
Not
scary.
depressing.
Really?
No, I didn't find it depressing, but I found it scary.
What is that?
Well, because many of these men were regular men. They were your neighbors and friends of friends, and they were the city butcher, or worked at cashier, or they're a lawyer, or a doctor, or a judge. I mean, they were what we would consider good
neighbors.
People. Yeah. So why was so much missed about them that it took however many kills, for lack of a better word, before they were discovered? That's what's scary. You don't necessarily know your neighbors, or you don't know them well. Or does anybody know? I mean, I've run into several people who went to school with Ted Bundy and had absolutely no idea
Really?
who he was, because he was so charming.
I was going to point towards that way so they could see your face a little better when we're talking. Because Ted Bundy, well, he was the good-looking kind.
He was, and there's two. One of them is extremely charismatic and good-looking, and the other one is either average to bad-looking. You would not describe them. David Carpenter, for example, the Trailside Slayer in San Francisco, when there were survivors too, they described him as ugly to hideous looking. Is he hideous? Maybe not, but he certainly was not attractive. So when they started looking at people, they kept in mind, if this guy was gorgeous, well then that's probably not him. Because it was very, and he had a snaggle tooth, so that helped him too. The two teeth were over each other.
Overlapping.
So it was a very unique thing that people remembered when they saw him, and when the people who survived
Is
saw
that how
him.
they finally captured him?
No, actually he got caught right after a kill, and then they knew they had the right man. So it's like, sometimes it's being in the right place at the right time, sometimes, for example, Bittaker and Roy Norris, Lawrence Bittaker and Roy Norris, both committed several murders in Redondo Beach area, Manhattan Beach. They would lure women in with marijuana or whatever, and then they get them high, and then they would commit these murders. Heinous, horrible murders.
Was there sex involved?
Oh yeah, of course.
Okay,
of
no,
course.
I mean,
Yes, I mean that was a given.
Is
So
it
that-
90 or 100% or 90% of the time?
I would say a very high percentage is some sort of sexual component, either during, before, or after. So yes, every now and then there's somebody who doesn't, but that's the odd killer out. But what was Bittaker and Roy's downfall is that they would stalk. They would watch a victim, they would go and they'd watch where she's going, what she's doing, does she look like their type? And they found this girl who was a cashier in a grocery store. She was pretty, and they watched her go from happy to be sad. Well, sad people make good targets because you're not paying attention to the world around you.
Right.
However, she wasn't sad. She'd just broken up with her boyfriend. So they misread her behavior. And one day, while following her home, they went after her, and she fought back. And she fought back, and she yelled, and she screamed. Neighbors came out, and each one took off in a different way, but they got the license plate of the van, and then it was a very short time before they were caught.
So they stalked their victims and this and that.
They looked for a particular prey, a particular type of girl that wasn't going to scream and yell, that was going to be afraid. This girl was not afraid, she was angry. And so they totally misread her body language, which is what my second PhD is in, body language manipulation and lying. Because body language is a very fascinating whole. I was recently dating a guy who would ask me a question and he would say, "You took too long, you're lying." And I said, "What article did you read?" Because my pausing to think has nothing to do with whether or not I'm lying, it's whether or not I want to answer the question.
Oh,
You know, it's like,
yeah.
he would say that. It was like, I'm not lying, you are. And then I realized how many lies he told me.
So it usually is that the other person
Yes, so
is a
they
liar.
know they're about to lie or have lied, so they project it onto you. Now, if you are an expert, you can watch somebody, but you have to look at a lot of things, like, you know, if you're remembering, you look to the left, if you're making it up, you look to the right, but that's not always true. It depends on, literally, it depends on what culture you're in and what hemisphere. It's reversed in the southern hemisphere. So if you just came from a trip there, you might be looking the wrong way according to experts. So you never rely on one particular piece of body language to tell you the truth. You have to look at a whole picture.
I consider myself I'm an instinct player. I read people very quickly, and maybe that's because I was brought up in the streets and in prison.
No, you have to.
You have to learn.
Yeah.
But the one thing maybe you can agree with this or not, what I find is the majority of women that I watch, they're not conscious of around them.
Oh, very much true. Gavin DeBecker wrote a book called The Gift of Fear, which I recommend to everyone. Read The Gift of Fear. It will teach you how to pay attention and still be self-absorbed, because we are really seeing everything around us, and we're not always taking it in, but it's there. So that's when that little intuition says there's trouble coming or something's wrong. It's because we saw it.
Right.
We saw it in the corner of our eye 100 feet away. And our eyes are great. They see a ton of things. Process it back here, not up here.
Right.
So it's a great book, Gavin DeBecker, Gift of Fear.
The Gift of Fear, because I've been around, I'll just say I've been around women, and I can just walk, I'm very, very quiet walk, and I'd be standing next to them, and they don't even know I'm there.
Yeah, they're too into whatever's going on. I understand that as a woman and a psychologist, but we have to learn how to be in that moment, but also pay attention to
Outside
the rest
of the
moment.
book, what would you recommend to women not to be, how to be, outside of just reminding yourself, I should be conscious. Women have to learn to
You have to learn.
do that.
Yeah,
I
pay
mean,
attention.
It's a very big, and I mean, it's not like 1%, it's 90% that I see of women don't look around.
Right.
Because as an actor too, we observe people. And around this neighborhood here, you get a lot of people, and I watch. Outside of they have the cell phone, and I mean, they're really
Makes it worse.
forget the address then.
Yeah.
But when they drive and this and that, they're not. I know women just don't want to see what's around them.
Well, one reason is, I think, because we don't want to believe we could be a target of anything, even an accidental target, much less a real target. So if we're not thinking about it, we're thinking about the fight we had with the husband or whatever, then we don't have to be a target. And one thing happened when I was, my daughter was very little. And my daughter, oh, bless her heart, she would just speak what was on her mind. It didn't matter where we were, when we were, whatever, it was sometimes not good. So this one particular time, we walked into the bank and we came out. We were at the first legal parking spot, and then next was one of those stripe parking, and there was a red truck with its motor running, and the guy in it had a stocking over his head. Now, I had seen the guy walk in, and I had, for some reason, paid attention to him just because there was something about the way he walked that was odd. And I thought, oh, they're robbing the bank. Got to do something. So I say to my daughter, get in the car, and she says, but he's got a stocking on his head. I said, shut up. And she's gone, and I said, just please be quiet and get in the car.
That's not a good thing to yell out.
No, exactly. Now, we were lucky because he was not paying attention. We got in the car, drove around, and I called the police and said there's a robbery in progress.
Wow.
But yeah, you know, if I hadn't been paying attention, I don't know if I actually even would have noticed the guy in the stocking. Because you kind of blend in. You don't really look in windows. You want to give people their privacy.
Well, no, I mean, it's funny you should say looking in windows. I remember back East Drive with my nieces and nephews, my sister and them used to get crazy about me because I used to tell them, they were little kids, I say, why do we look in people's windows? To see naked women.
Yeah. Okay, that works sometimes. Yeah, absolutely.
Especially in Manhattan.
Yeah.
See,
No, yeah, it's
my
an
sister
interesting.
used to get crazy when I'd say that.
Yeah. I can imagine their poor kids. No,
We want to see
don't
naked
do
women.
that. We don't want that.
But I was thinking, going back to the serial killers, you know, some of the best parolees are murderers. And they found out. But now that, you know, put aside serial killers, I remember Son of Sam. I was up there with, you know, I remember him. But when you really look at serial killers, they're really cowards. I mean, they go after women.
Well, that's not always true. There are serial killers who go after men.
I'm talking about the ones that go after women. Like
Okay.
that. You know, I mean, rape is one of the.
It's power. It's showing I'm better than you. I can have you anytime I want you.
Yeah, it's
It's not love or even sex.
No, it's not.
It's
I mean,
just power.
It's actually. I mean, I remember Richard Robles. There was a murder in New York. It was called the Wiley Girls. Actually, Kojak series was that was the pilot.
Oh, okay.
I remember years later, you know, up in Attica, I met Richard Robles, but I was in the tombs with him too when it happened, when they busted him. But years later, they put rape on him, so he couldn't sit at our table because he had a rape charge on him. You know, we had to stay in Little New York.
Okay.
This was in Attica, and I remember one day I was talking to him. I got him a job in the art shop, and I says, well, why did you rape her? He said, I didn't rape her. And I believe him because what they did back then, it was a very famous case and they had charges. Since he broke in, all he wanted was some money. Well, he said the one girl just went crazy after him, you know, fought him in his neck and being a junkie and he wanted to kill him. But he says he didn't go there, he didn't rape him or anything like that. But they, you know, they threw that charge in, the newspapers do it. I've been arrested where they said that I was hiding in the bushes. You know, I was sitting by my front door.
Well, unfortunately, I have read some creative accounting.
And you know, they add charges, and then they come down.
Well, the whole point of adding the charges is to get you to plead out so that you don't go into the system to scare you.
That's what
and say you're going to hit this, and this, and everything else is going to go bad with you too.
It really is. But I remember Richard doing that, and he told me. And I felt bad for him, but it was on there, and we still couldn't let him sit at our table. You know, well, back in those days, child molesters, and then you kill them.
Well, yeah, child molesters, forget, if you go into a prison, almost any prison in the country, you better be in solitary or away because you're not liked at all.
Well, today they're out in population, you know, if their money's long, things have changed so much. I mean, it's an interesting world. It's very, I don't know how to put it, but I would have rather have not done it. But since I have, it's as an actor, which we'll get into a little later, we'll talk about acting. I mean, it's a gift for me, in a sense.
I think everything we learn, good and bad, helps us be better people and better actors.
Yeah.
Because you can bring something to it that somebody has to fake.
Right.
You don't. There's certain things that I can
substitute.
bring.
I like to use the word substitute.
I'll say fake, but because I mean, you know a truism, And if I'm looking at somebody watching, unless you're a damn good actor, and we know there are some out there, I can say, oh, he doesn't have a clue what he's talking about or how he's behaving. His mannerisms aren't there, his what
that's
have you.
interesting, yeah.
And yet, I might still like the show or the movie, but I'll look at some people and I'll do this. If I watch a particular movie or show and it is incredible, I'll look it up and say, has that person been through that? And there's some playwrights who've written some incredible stories. And I said, let me look these up because I think that somebody in their family suffered through this, and always it's true. And that gives them such a good understanding of the truth.
Yeah. Well, I can see with playwrights, and I mean, they write usually about them, what they know.
Right.
And even when they write novels, I mean, you write about what you know.
Yeah, exact serial killers.
So,
body language, liars.
Were there any serial killers in your background, in your family?
No, my grandmother was murdered. My great uncle was murdered, but those both happened when I was little, but who knows, they might have affected me.
I wonder why. Well, I've had family members that, well, we call it whacked. A few of them got whacked, a few almost got whacked. I almost did a few times myself. You know, a friend of mine, I call him Two Gun Pete. He got me out of there, boys. Or else I wouldn't have been here today.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, I mean,
there's some hell stories. But now you still do this? Do you still go to the talk to the death row inmates? And
no, well, every now and then I'll get requests from death row inmates now. There's a movie called Copycat, which is an old, incredibly well done movie about forensic psychologists and the police department and prisoners, death row prisoners. And it's one of the truest to what I do in forensics. There's a line she says in there, and that is that prisoners talk to each other, and they talk to each other in different prisons. So my name is out there, and every now and then I'll get somebody from death row who'll write me or email me, and they're not supposed to have computers.
It's called sending a kite.
Yeah, and they will ask.
Do they still call it that?
I think one has, the other one didn't, but yeah, they'll try to get me to come in and deal with them to help with an appeal.
So the forensics and all, I mean, it's really fascinating. I mean, that world and that you're in there. Wow. But does it pay?
Well, I do a lot of pro bono work, so
really?
No.
Why is that?
Because if somebody comes to me and I do both sides, criminal and to save your life. So let's say you're accused and you didn't do it, and you come to me and you say, find a way to help me because my lawyer is so-so, or I have to go to PD, then I work with you and your lawyer to prove that you did not do it.
Yeah, I think I mentioned this to you years ago. I have a friend, John Sonny Francesi, who's 95, he's in federal prison. He got 50 years in 1967. They called it a bank robbery. And he said, he told everybody, if you can prove I did this, any reporter, anybody, I'll tell you everything I know about the mob. Now, he's been with, everybody knows, he's been with the Colombo family for many years. Everybody knows who John Sonny Francesi is. I mean, they're supposed to know. I keep in touch, but I think I've asked people, if you were interested in something like that, because he really doesn't belong. They sent him back because his son was wearing a wire the last time when he was just out, and Sonny was there talking to his friends, and his friends are people that they're wise guys.
Of course.
And they busted him and sent him back. But a lot of people, I mean, Sonny, he said, if you can prove I did this. You know yourself, if the government wants you, they got you.
They'll create something. Yeah, exactly.
Yes. That's what they did. A lot of people thought it was Robert Kennedy because Robert Kennedy thought that he was having sex with Ethel. And Robert Kennedy.
Kennedy, they had the power.
Robert Kennedy was a little bit of a, he broke the law all the time. He could care less about the law. He wanted it his way. He had that little man.
Was that when he was Attorney General? Yeah, so he kind of was the law.
He was the law.
Yeah.
He made his own law.
Exactly.
And he hated Italians because he knew I often said it, the Kennedys would have been bartenders with wet brains if it wasn't for the Italians, you know, because his good father.
Yeah.
They're the ones that set him up, made all his money.
Well, and there's that whole issue
was elected.
with John
Yeah.
down in New Orleans, and
That's when they threw the guy, the boss was down in New Orleans. They took him to South America, threw him out of the plane.
which one was
I
that?
forgot his Mazur. It begins with an M.
Okay.
And they really threw him out of a plane in South America, you know, parachute, but with nothing. And he got back to America. You know, and a lot of people think that was this was Bobby Kennedy did that. You know, because he was mad. The guy was he had that little man complex too.
Mm-hmm.
And I know a lot of people they
The
get mad.
Napoleon complex.
Well, is that what they call it?
Yeah.
No,
Yeah.
well, little man.
When it's
Is that politically correct?
Well, that's what they call it, and
Yeah.
actually it's a well-known complex
right,
for
it is.
shorter of men.
Yeah, I mean, and hating Italians. And the Irish always hated the Italians anyway back in those days. It was a big conflict. So you had that. They knew John F. Kennedy never would have got elected without Sinatra and the guys from Chicago. Giancana.
I know Gene.
Yeah, see? Good guy, wasn't he?
He was actually good to me. Yeah.
Right, that's what I'm saying. Yeah. They were the best people in the world come from there. I mean, if they were running the country, we wouldn't have any problems. When they had Vegas and this and that, it was the greatest place in the world to go to.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, you know, look at the smile on her.
Well, it is an interesting, whole different world.
Well, yes, because it was based on respect.
That's true.
If you did the right thing, you got carte blanche.
Right, right.
And you
And,
knew
and
the
if you were
consequence.
honorable, you had
That's
to be
what I'm saying,
honorable.
yes.
And how many people do we have today in other not honorable? They don't know what honor is.
They don't know what it is,
Yeah.
especially in politics.
Yeah.
You know, we're not going to get into that, but that's why I tell people, if the Italians ran it, the old days like there was back in the 60s, and you would have no problems. No problem.
Interesting thought.
You know, the safest neighborhoods in the country are always Italian
Oh
neighborhoods.
yeah, no, you're right.
You know what's going to happen to you if you go in there.
Right,
You know?
right.
Even when I was in
things are-
prison, you know, in Attica, I always remember that you had the Puerto Ricans, the whites, the blacks, and then the Italians, they used to call it. We weren't even considered part of the white crowd.
Okay.
They said white guys over there, and then,
And
oh, there's the
Italians.
Italians over there.
Ah, that's interesting.
Yeah, we had it. It was
Yeah.
things like that. We got a couple minutes. Now let's get the name of this book again and how they can get in touch with you.
Okay, well, the book,
Great
I'm
for the
finishing
picture.
editing. It's called In the Mind of a Killer.
In the Mind of a Killer, is there a website or something they can
Well,
go to?
my website is www.cynthialeahclark.com. But
Cynthia Lee
Clark.
Clark.
C-L-A-R-K.
Not doctor, just Cynthia.
No, it's just Cynthia.
Okay.
And soon it will be out on Kindle, if all goes right in the next couple of weeks. So I will, on both my website and my Facebook post when it's ready. So look at it. It's an interesting book, and not just because I wrote it.
No, it's got to be fascinating.
Yeah.
I mean, the criminal, because